So when I saw this drone at CES 2020, I was incredibly excited. XDynamics was basically fixing all of the things that we had complained about with the Evolve 1. If you remember the Evolve 1, it sort of fell flat on its face. There was a lot of shortcomings with that drone. And the Evolve 2 was poised to fix all of those problems. Then the pandemic happened and they went silent. And I honestly thought that this would never make it into consumers' hands. But a couple of weeks ago, they reached out, asked if I was still interested in taking a look at the drone, and I said yeah. So this is going to be my first impressions since going hands-on with the Evolve 2. Buckle up, because I'm not holding back. What's going on, everybody? Ken here, you're watching OriginaldoBo. This is my first impressions video of the XDynamics Evolve 2. I'm really passionate about technology. I'm really passionate about products like this. I love seeing new things in the marketplace. But before we elaborate a little bit more on this, let's go over some standard disclaimers with this video. First off, I did not purchase this drone. XDynamics did send this out to me to review. This is a pre-sale drone. There's actually a stamp somewhere on the bottom that says not intended for resale. This is a pre-production model. Matter of fact, this model is so pre-production, it was so beat up by the time I got it. The lens has dings in it, there's scuffs on the carbon fiber. It looked like it was kicked around by UPS. And then just to top it all off, while I was at the beach, a dog pissed on the bag that they included with it. So yeah, it's been torture tested for sure. So XDynamics is not seeing this video before I post it. So the first time I post this is the first time that they will see it as well. However, with that said, I have been in constant communication with them, probably to the point that they're tired of me about my happenings with this drone. With that said, let's go ahead and just talk about the build quality and overall design of the Evolve 2. So the Evolve 2 sports what they call a monocoque design. The top chassis of the airframe is completely carbon fiber. It is incredibly rigid and really durable. It feels amazing. The video is not going to do it any justice as far as the overall beauty of this. They improved over the previous generation Evolve. The previous generation was a bit chunky, it was fat. It was a weird looking drone. They made it a lot more sexy and streamlined with the Evolve 2. The aircraft is crafted out of just polished, beautiful carbon fiber. It really does look stunning. They've also went ahead and improved the motors. These motors now sport a quick release design. They are calling these the Dyno Wing 2 props, and these props are quite huge. You'll notice that the front props are slightly more raised than the rear, and this allows for them to pass one another without colliding. It's a pretty unique design. And despite these props being so huge and the motors being so large on this drone, it's actually pretty quiet with all that being said. The landing gear is a plastic sort of polycarbonate landing gear. It is not removable, so they don't clip in and clip out, which I thought that would have been a better idea to make this a little bit more compact. Unfortunately, that is not the case. The underside of the aircraft is made out of magnesium that also acts as its heat sink. It's on right now, but as you can tell, there is no fans, so it's not spooling up or spooling down. It's completely silent. So I probably won't leave this on for too much longer because I don't want it to overheat, because again, part of the cooling process is the fact that it does need air moving against those fins. I could be wrong about that, but I am in the hottest climate out of all the reviewers, so I don't want it to damage any internal components, but that is something to keep in mind, that there isn't a fan built in. But they did test this in Death Valley, and supposedly it came out on top, so take that for what it is. The camera on this is the Astra Micro Four Thirds camera. It's a 12 megapixel Sony sensor in there. It's Micro Four Thirds, so if you're familiar with something like a GH5, it has the same sensor as the Panasonic GH5 cameras. So quite literally, I can take lenses that I use on my DSLR camera and put them on this camera system, which, as a matter of fact, as we start talking about the filming process, I did in fact have to do that with the lens, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit in this video, but you can interchange the lenses, which I think is pretty cool. The gimbal also seems to be pretty strong. It is a great build quality, and it just sort of snaps on here to front. There is a clasp here. You press the button in and you are able to disconnect the gimbal, exchange the gimbals for other gimbals if they produce other gimbals, or replace any damaged components. Pretty cool. Underside of the motors, you'll notice there are LEDs. These LEDs are able to be changed to any color that you desire. I think that is an interesting touch. There's also sort of another sort of heat sink. I don't know if it serves a massive purpose, but underneath there, it does look like there is some form of cooling additive with that magnesium touch. Again, could just be for looks, but I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt that it actually does something. As far as obstacle avoidance on the build design, we have two forward-facing cameras. On the bottom, we have a camera as well, along with the LiDAR sensor and the ground position sensor. At the time of recording this video, the obstacle avoidance is not functioning, which is sort of weird. It's only been 2 years to get the obstacle avoidance functioning. I don't know, sort of weird. Overall, it looks interesting. As far as the build quality and design goes, I really don't have much of a complaint with the aircraft itself as far as that regard goes. It does take an SD card, or you can put a CFast 2.0 card in there. I have been opting to use a CFast card as it's the fastest form of writing, and it also allows you to take advantage of the ProRes. Let's talk about the build quality of the ground station. Yeah, this ground station is quite massive. It is a clamshell design. It also sports 2 separate screens. I'll be completely real with you. I am not a fan of this ground station. I think it's absolutely unnecessarily bulky, and I'm not a fan of it. I don't need 2 screens. It's just another thing to distract me from what's going on with the drone. They could have saved size, they could have saved weight if we just had 1 screen, and they could have saved cost. But again, part of what they're trying to do is really like emulate this dual screen option here, which again, not a fan of the dual screen. The screen is bright, 1000 nits of brightness, and in my testing it works well. What I do like is that the clamshell design does sort of block the sun from either side. There is also a webcam on this this device as well. In the front here, there's a webcam. I'm not really sure why that's there. It has to be there. That is sort of weird. It does have Android on board. It's a very heavily customized version of Android, but deep down underneath all this, it is Android. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, well, I've seen other reviews. Why does your drone or your ground station have antennas? Well, I'll talk more about that in the issues section of this video, but I went ahead and ordered some antennas that are specific for the 2.4, 5.8 gigahertz bandwidth because I wanted to try the external option. One of the things that this machine allows you to do is to switch between internal antennas and external antennas. So I did test both ways during my time with this video. There's also a plethora of custom buttons on this. I mean, all in all, I mean, this would feel like a very comfortable RC, but I just feel like it is clunky. One of the things that they did not send me was a lanyard. When I opened the box, actually my unit has been used for a while. Batteries were laying on top of the Evolve unit. The presentation was a complete shit show. There was no lanyard in there. This is a clunky controller, and you either put it on a quarter 20 and put it on a tripod, or you're going to use a lanyard. A lanyard is a must with this. I don't care who you are. Unless if you're Andre the Giant and you have these massive hands, it's gonna be cumbersome to hold this. It also, the counterbalance of this, as you can tell, I'm not a fan of the controller. The ground station, they want us to call it the ground station. Let's talk about the battery life. All right, so these are the batteries. They are 6,700 milliamp hour batteries. So this is quite a large battery. And one interesting thing about this battery is it does charge relatively quickly. With the included charger, you can charge both the ground station and the battery. And in my experience using these, I have 2 batteries. Both batteries charge really quick, so you never really find yourself waiting too terribly long for these charge. The batteries are better than the first generation Evolve. So if you had any access to the first generation, you'd know that the batteries were hit or miss with the build quality and the performance. These are definitely better. With that said, I'm averaging about 22 to 15 minutes of flight. It widely varies. I know that is a huge number to talk about, but the flight times that I have been seeing have been really, really sporadic as far as time, and also being safe. Like, I'm landing with about 20% battery. So when I talk about this, yes, there's battery left. I have about 20% left to the battery by the time I'm landing, because I'm trying to be, how would a consumer fly this? Would they fly this to 10%? No, most are going to fly to about 20% battery and then land. And that's what I've been doing. And yeah, the battery life, I don't think it's the best. Does that have any effect on the fact that there isn't a fan cooling the internal components? Could that be a reason why we're seeing decreased times? I'm not really sure, but I will say last night flying, I was getting about 20 minutes of flight time. During the day, I've seen about 15 minutes of flight time. So flight time is something that needs to be improved upon. Luckily enough, I believe you do get 2 batteries when you buy one of these, so there's that. The Evolve 2 improves upon a lot of the shortcomings with the Evolve 1. The top speed is 53 miles per hour, which in my testing, I have been able to hit those top speeds in sport mode. One of the biggest things that I don't like in sport mode is the fact that it does lose altitude when you are, ripping along 53 miles an hour. You do have to be mindful that you will lose altitude, but it can exceed those speeds even, and you'll actually get speed warnings as well. Now, in my testing with the flight, it flies very stable. However, it doesn't really hold its position all that amazingly. I would expect better for it having LiDAR. It seems a little bit floaty at times, but it's not terrible. It's not terrible by any means. It's just not perfect. And unfortunately, at $3,600, I think the positioning hold needs to be perfect. There's been times when I was flying this where the camera would completely disconnect and I would lose all video, which I talked to them about this and they pushed out an update. And since that update, it hasn't happened. But one of my biggest gripes with this unit, this aircraft specifically, is the fact that there is artifacting in the screen as I'm flying. If I yawed left or right or moved left, right, pitch forward or backwards or hit up, I was getting artifacting. Now they did put out an update which resolved some of those issues. It resolved some of those issues, but the artifacting and transmission issues still persist, enough to the point where while I was flying in the city, I honestly did not feel as confident as I was with the Mavic or any other drone like the Evo, to be quite honest. I was not as confident with this drone as I was with the other ones. The other thing, which I think is more disheartening than the actual transmission issue, is the fact that the transmission has a hell of a lot of latency. There is so much latency. When I'm landing, I have to be going pretty damn slow. Otherwise, I will overshoot my landing. And as I'm coming down, the drone will still be moving forward. You really do have to take into account for the latency, because if you don't, you will miss your shot. Now, can that be fixed? I don't know. I hope it can be fixed. And that was part of the reason why I ended up using external antennas. I wanted to rule out the fact that the internal antenna was actually the problem. Now I'm going to do a brief demonstration here on the screen so you can actually see the latency on the screen. And now you may say to yourself, well, the ground station is really close to the aircraft. Well, that honestly shouldn't matter. We should still see some of the best latency given the fact that they are both in the same vicinity. But as you can see, we have a problem here with latency, and that is a dangerous thing when you have an aircraft in the air. Milliseconds matter, and in this case, actually seconds matter, because that's what it really does feel like. So as far as performance goes, there is a lot of room for improvement. Okay, so if you're buying this drone, you're probably buying it because you can exchange the lenses and it's a micro four thirds sensor. And I will tell you that the color science on this drone looks pretty damn good. Everything looks really super cinematic and filmic. It has a very soft, subdued feel to the color science. Now, that's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but for me, I found the color science to be pretty solid. However, if you are somebody that just wants a straight out of the camera experience, this drone is definitely not going to be for you in that department. This drone does require a little bit of post-processing and work to get the images to be where you are. But the same can be said for a cinema camera. When you spit your images out, they're not ready to go like a Sony, a7 III or something. You have to mold those images to get them to look exactly how you would want them to look. So the same can be said for this as well. Now, the interesting thing about this system is that it does shoot in ProRes. You have ProRes 422, ProRes LT, which is their light version, and then ProRes Proxy. Now, with each version of ProRes that you decide to shoot with, there are some compromises. In ProRes 422, you can only shoot in 23.97 or 24 frames per second. There's no high-speed frame options, or 29.97, which this timeline, this video is in a 29.97. But if you want those higher than normal frame rates, or 29.97 or 30 frames per second, step it down to ProRes LT and you have those options available to you. Stepping down to ProRes Proxy or dropping the image quality to 2.7K enables you to have those higher frame rates, such as 60 frames per second. Of course, you can go ahead and shoot in H.264 and H.265 as well, just like you could on DJI drones. However, unlike DJI drones, 10-bit color is not an option in 264 or 265. On the Mavics, you're able to shoot in 265 D-Log 10-bit, but on the Evolve, you can't. I think that's a huge miss and something they need to reconsider. I don't think the only profiles you should be able to shoot 10-bit color on is the ProRes versions. That's just my thought, from somebody that does work professionally. Sometimes I need smaller files, smaller than normal files, and to be able to have that option of 10-bit and H.265 would be a better option. Another thing that I did notice with shooting ProRes, there is a subtle gamma curve that raises the shadows on this drone specifically. And when it does that, it does increase the noise. So if you're gonna shoot this at night, I would highly recommend you stay away from ProRes, at least for right now, until they can revise that color profile, because it raises the shadows way too high. And if you have your ISO over 800 or 1000, it's going to introduce way too much noise to the image. But in H.265, I was able to push the ISO all the way up to 5000, what I would consider pretty cleanly, and have very, very minimal noise in the image, which I thought was pretty impressive in that regard. I'm gonna go ahead and play some sample footage here that I've shot over the past couple of weeks, so you can see the results of color grading ProRes, and we'll talk about the images after you watch this. Alrighty, so for the opening clips, all of that was shot in ProRes LT 422 LT, and it was color graded. It was ISO 100, and the lens that you were seeing is not the standard lens that ships on this. This is a 17mm Olympus lens. The lens that I ended up using for that shot, along with the night shots, was a Laowa 7.5mm fixed lens. That's a manual focus lens. Now there's a reason why I did this, because the night shots, I ended up having to go out twice for the night shots. The first time I used the 17mm lens, and when I used that lens, there was nothing but problems with it. It wasn't focusing on objects. AFS autofocus wasn't able to lock on a target, and all of my images were really super soft, which was a bit of a bummer because it's an f1.8 lens, and I thought they would have looked great. When I flipped it over to manual focus wasn't functioning. When I asked them about that, they said manual focus with this lens was not functioning. So I was really pissed off that night. I came back, I looked at all the images, and every single photo I took looked super soft, looked terrible. There was crazy amounts of noise in the ProRes, and I was frustrated. I was really upset because I wasted an entire evening filming footage that just looked like shit. And I was mind boggled because this sensor should be capable of so much more. So what I did was I ended up going back out again with the Micro Four Thirds sensor along with the Laowa 7.5 lens that I use on my Cinelifters. Because the lens was just slightly bigger than this, I didn't have to do a counterbalance, and because it's light enough, it worked fine. And my end results were much better, sharper images. Every single photo I took looked amazing, but it was such a wide field of view, so you had to get really close to things, and sometimes your verticals can be a little bit skewed because of that wide angle. So it made things a little bit harder to shoot, but the end result was the images looked exactly how I had in my mind I was hoping they would look. So I think there's gonna need some work as far as the lens and camera combination, but I do wanna point out again, this is pre-release firmware, and my camera lens was dinged up. Like, I don't know if you can see it, but the front here, like if I put my finger on this, yeah, it's pretty rough. Like it was dropped or bent. Like I'm sort of pissed that they would send me a aircraft in this condition simply because, you know, out of everybody you sent the drone to, one, I'm not gonna hold back, and two, I'm the most critical of them all. Why would you even risk a video like this knowing that I am that critical? Why? You need to fire your marketing guy, for one, for even not approving and no quality assurance for sending these units out. When you put a product out like this, you put your best foot forward. And this, what you provided to me, is not your best foot forward as far as the condition I received it in, which is an absolute shame. And I'm just a little bit pissed. I'm a little bit pissed about that. All right, let me just jump into the conclusion of this because I think we need to, we'll wrap this video up. All right, so in conclusion, this is a beautiful drone that isn't perfect. And I think that's the biggest takeaway. They made a lot of improvements. But the improvements are negated by a lot of its shortcomings. The transmission, the glitching, the software not being 100% perfected, not giving your pilot confidence to be able to get the shot. I was able to get some amazing shots. I'm considered a good pilot and I'm able to get those shots, but it took me a few times to get those shots. If I was flying this professionally on a set, flying those routes multiple times would be unacceptable for a professional, and no DP would put up with that whatsoever. This is touted as a professional utility, and it doesn't provide professional performance. If they make corrections, if they fix the issues, then it will be an amazing aircraft and it will be an amazing performer. But that's if they fix the problems. I'm just frustrated because as somebody who has to work with clients, work with companies, brands like this, Benny, this is your company. This is your company. You want the best possible experience, the most different experience that you can possibly bring to the market. Why was this released in this fashion. Why was this released like this? Why is there so much not functioning and in the hands of reviewers? Why? If it's to rush to beat the Mavic 3 to market, that's not the right reasons, because your target customer is somebody who needs to fill a void between an Inspire and a Phantom that does not exist. That's your target customer, not the Mavic. This should be perfect. Right now, it's okay. It's not good, it's not great, and okay just isn't worth $3,600. All right, I'm done. Send me a pre-addressed, send me a UPS shipping label so I can send this back to you guys.
So I had to go run up a check. I got the message on me, ain't no flexing on me. My attorney gon' call and collect. Blessings on blessings for me. My successes only made them envious, they got upset. I had to put all their egos in check. I want the money, the power, respect. And I heard you know so-and-so, you not a threat. Cause I really know so-and-so, they like my family.